This time on Between the Wheels.
Many people up till about 1971 died in dragsters, literally. Every weekend somebody was dying. The motor was blowing up, this was happening, cars were cut in half and stuff. And for the older guys, or the guys of that stuff, there's a rush about getting into a front-end dragster where the motor's 2 feet in front of you and the headers are beside your ears. We come from a different era. We had a lot of freedom in a lot of ways. We were a little bit more rebellious and also got away with that. I'm very serious at the line. Whatever I can do to win, that's what I'm going to do. When the race is over, let's have a drink. I had a good career with them. They ran really well. I'm still doing it to this day. I'm 70 years old. And sometimes different is just cool.
Bought it new in 1970.
Those were the best days of our lives, I think.
17 years old when I bought that car.
Ran on the street. I went there, made noise, and went home.
Yeah, that's what it feels like in a 9-second car.
I got it up on jack stands and I cried.
Most people would look at it and say, it's a basket case, you can't fix that.
We didn't have any safety checks, none of this bullshit now. Everybody just drove a car,
At 40 miles an hour, if you're gonna crash in this thing, you're friggin' dead.
I spent probably 16-hour days. I would end up sleeping in the body shop in a car.
It's going to be a lot of work, and she says, who cares?
It wasn't that we had money falling out of our pockets. We made the car happen because of the desire to restore the car.
So I'm here with a Pontiac legend, Pontiac Moe. It's nice to meet you, man.
You too, Max. Good
How
to
are
meet
you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. We certainly fit the nice weather to do what we're doing.
Heck yeah, summer's here and it's time to talk about cool cars. So talk to me about this 37 Plymouth and your background, because you're pretty much a legend with it.
Up to a few years ago, thinking of having a car like this here, but the nostalgia movement was moving so fast all over North America, even in Australia, a place that is just phenomenal, that I decided to put this 37 Plymouth together. And being a Pontiac guy, I put a Pontiac in it with 2 4-barrels, a 400 out of GTO, and this is what I wound up with. I was only 12 years old. I was already sanding cars. All my uncles, my brother-in-law, my cousins, they all had the James Dean greaser, and right back to the 70s where the Elvis Presley Sidebirds came in. That's what I grew up in, and my first muscle car was I actually bought from my dad on a weekly payment, and I just went from there.
Why Pontiac for you? Because you've done Pontiac your whole life.
I guess a lot of it happened is when I was a young kid, like I was saying earlier, I had some of my brother-in-laws that came over with 65 GTOs, and again, those cars weren't very old and they were very strong, and there was just something like you're a 12-year-old kid and you see somebody do a burnout in the middle of the streets, which back then was more easier to get away with, okay? And the car was all over the place, and you're sitting in that seat, you don't forget that. And I still remember the cars and ran them banging through the gears, because that's the way it was. And my dad would race down Scott Street against his brothers and all that stuff. It was great, and I'd be sitting in the back seat and just flying all over the back seat, because back then we didn't even wear seat belts. It was more rebellious, and that'd be just a model example. There was nothing about it. A cop would pull you over and look at you and say, nice car, and you're all over in the back seat from the last race that you had on the streets.
It's funny, I think that I have to have an appreciation for people of your generation, because those of you who survived that era, are absolute legends.
The only difference that was different for me and my dad is my dad was a real street guy. I was a track guy. It stuck with me, and I also always wanted to have something a little bit different, and I never got away from it. And speaking for myself, I did very well with my Pontiac motors. I made good power, I had a good career with them. They ran really well. I'm still doing it to this day. I'm 70 years old, and I still stand by them.
Well, that's really cool. So we're going to talk about this thing because obviously you put the Pontiac motor in it. But before we talk about the Plymouth, you actually raced front engine dragsters, which is really uncommon these days. And not only that, but you actually have one right in that trailer over there.
Max, little did I know at that time where I was going with it. I knew that I had bought a dragster back in the 80s from a guy in Ottawa. It stuck with me. I was a bit younger. Things were not, you don't have as much money. You're a younger guy, right? But I never forgot about it because I didn't have it very long. But I said later in life I'd like to have one. And this goes back down to when the nostalgia got really strong. I found this car through my nephew, and he said to me, he says, there's a dragster for sale in Ontario. I said, well, Ontario, California? He says, no. He says, Ontario right here. So I called the guy that owned it, who is a friend of mine today. His name was Don Jackson, and he told me about the car, and he told me that it had all the history on it, and I went down there and I brought it home, and that's where it began for me.
Wow.
And it was a real original, very rare little John Botero car. And most guys that own all these fast cars know the name because he was a very good engine builder. He was good friends with Roy Trepanier and all those guys on the States. Those were all buddies. And then eventually in life moved to California and he was building hot rods. When I bought my fuel altered, which is the blue Fiat, okay, it also happened to be a John Botero car. So that was really something to bring two cars to Ontario from a builder like that. And like I said, for me, that worked out really well. Because whenever I went to races, people would say, wow, that's that car. So it really made good topic, good fun, regardless of how fast it was.
Well, that's really cool too. And when I look at those cars, there's a lot more to them. First of all, you wear the old school helmet, you know, you don't have a full face mask or anything. This is old school stuff, and you still do it that way. That's
so for instance, if you went down to the meltdown drags in the USA and you register your car, if you have, we'll say, like I said, a 1990 mags, you're not racing. The car has criteria that it's got to follow.
What type of criteria do they follow?
The gazzer mask, the helmet, their wheels have to be, we'll say, 60s type of wheels. You'll see a lot of cars with 60s paint jobs, the way they sit, the stance, you know, and all that stuff there. It's all part.
Wow, so it's really like governed, I guess, what you can do. It's really...
and it's good because it's about trying to keep the nostalgia stuff alive. And there's nothing I like more than when I meet a younger man, such as yourself, to explain to him what happened and where it was going and stuff like that there. Because if you went to one, you'd be just amazed. And the power they made back in those days was actually pretty good.
So that's what I want to talk about. So you keep mentioning nostalgia. Maybe mention the criteria of what your nostalgia is.
The real nostalgia, like I said, you go to some races and some of them will do the cutoff date as 1974.
Okay.
Most of them now was 1968. And the reason why they want to keep a period correct, it's like anything else. It's a part of history of where we come from and what we've done. Okay. My dad, my granddad, maybe your dad or somebody else's granddad. And if you don't try to have some sort of regulations to keep it the way it was, like anything else, okay, it's going to fade away.
Yeah.
But the one thing they are strict about is even though you're using all this old school stuff, there's safety regulations that are very strict. Like for instance, my Dragster, okay, extra bars put in it, updated seat belts, all that stuff there, transmission blankets, all the safety has to be there, but it's got to be
as safe as possible.
As safe as possible. But there's some stuff that if you don't have it, you're not racing. But you got to be realistic. If you're going to go 150 miles an hour in a 1968 car, you want to make sure that you're, and they'll push that. Like for instance, an engine diaper goes underneath the oil pan. So if you blow up a motor, the oil doesn't fall on the ground.
Okay.
Also, your back wheels are right there, so you wouldn't want that to get out. So that's mandatory. So that's stuff that works for you.
Okay, and that's totally understandable. With the old cars, there's only so much you can do. Certain things you can't do, like the thing about the front engine dragsters that makes them so special, and because they're out loud, is the fact that you're sitting basically with the diff right beside you.
Yes.
So if something happens, well, it's not a good outcome.
Yeah. Through the years, many people up till about 1971 died in dragsters, literally. Every weekend somebody was dying. The motor was blowing up, this was happening, cars were cut in half and stuff. And back in 1970, 71, can't remember exactly what year, Don Garlits was able to perfect the rear engine dragster after he got into an accident and lost a foot and other injuries, and came back with the rear engine dragster, and it made history because it made things safer up to this day today when you watch the real racing. But for the older guys or the guys of that stuff, there's a rush about getting into a front end dragster where the motor's 2 feet in front of you and the headers are beside your ears. There's just a rush about that, and at the end of the day, that's why we do it.
You got to have some serious balls to drive a car like that.
Yes, well, you hear that every time when you go to a dragster. I've met a lot of my friends who have rear engine dragsters that are going 200, 250 miles an hour, where mine goes 150, and they say they wouldn't sit in that car.
Yeah, well, when you look at that diff just right there beside your legs, it's just it's kind of scary, I'm not gonna lie. That's pretty cool. But you made a lot of history, so you've been a Pontiac guy, you drove that. Let's talk about this Plymouth, not so Plymouth. Okay, so this basically, it has a Pontiac in it. Maybe talk about this car.
It was built to look like a race car, okay, like the 60s, okay? But it's got the convenience of driving it like an everyday car.
Okay.
Okay, but because this car actually has disc brakes and everything on it. It's got a real 70 Nova Chevy 10 bolt with an 8.5 in it.
Okay.
With 355 gears, so it's good stuff, you know what I mean? And then good brakes in the back. They still got to be good.
Yeah, and at the same time, so when I'm looking at this is a gasser. This is the first gasser we've done on the show. What is it that makes a car a gasser, first of all? And what is it that attracts you to it? Because the people that have gassers, they love these things. They're so passionate about it. Maybe tell me about that.
I guess that's a tough one. That's a tough one to answer because the reality is, I guess for some people it never really ran away. And the way these cars used to handle on the track, you know, cars today that go down the track are very good. They go like this and they go straight down. These cars were anything but. And there's just a different stance about something different.
It's the rush of going down with that experience.
Yeah, and that look, you know what I mean. And the Gazzer, there are some different things about it that you had to have, like the straight axle in the front. Doesn't necessarily make it a Gazzer because you could have one without the axle and still be a Gazzer, but they had to have that stance. They used to think back in those days that the higher the car was in the front, the less you would spin in the back, which in theory does make a lot of sense, right? It makes a lot of sense. But then they proved that the lower the car and nowhere goes underneath it, like today, they're actually faster.
Right.
And that is reality. But like I said, for the people who like this stuff and follow it, the love for them never goes away.
Okay, so the look, you got the straight axle, you got bias ply tires here in the front, which you don't see every day anymore, but you got real thick tires on the back. I guess that's another thing. Any other differences that pretty much, is there like up to a certain year that you would consider it a Gasser? Or?
Yes, the Gazzers, as a rule of thumb, you would probably never see, we'll say a 67 Chevelle. That you have seen some, okay, but by that time the Gazzer Wars, which is what it was called, the Gazzer Wars, or the Gazzer competition, okay, was already dying off. So by about 1965, 66, technology came in and cars were starting to change, okay, and these stayed behind. The real racers stopped using them. They put aside because it was all competition, right? But after all these guys did this on that, they still had the old cars, okay? After they were older or whatever, they took the cars back out, and it just exploded. It just came right back. It's big.
Wow, that's really cool. I've never been in one of these before, so I'm really excited to actually go inside and get the experience of a Gasser.
Well, you see, that's another thing. Once you drive in one of them, you know, you feel like almost feel like you're in a truck. That's basically what a straight axle is. It's like a truck, okay? It's just altogether different. You can see they got a smaller windshield, the angle of it, different kind of doors. It's just a different ride altogether. And you know, sometimes different is just cool.
Nice. Well, I'm gonna find out because it looks pretty cool. I think.
Like you look at this car here, Max, and who would think this gas tank's 57 years old?
Doesn't look like it.
You know, but all that stuff, that's, you know, you try to keep it as period as correct. Like a lot of people ask me, well, where's the grill? Well, back in the old days, they used to take off the grills because they were big and they were heavy, but they had to drill holes to get air into the rad so they would stay cool. Yeah. And that's the way this car's set up.
Nice. Okay, so you had the gas tank on the front, you had the grill removed and made like this. That's pretty cool. Any other, like inside the car, we're talking about the interior. How different is the interior?
Well, the inside of the car, back in the old days, a lot of cars caught fire and all that stuff there, okay? So they wouldn't use an interior in them except for a seat and a roll bar because of fire. You know, and also you're getting rid of weight, and weight, as you know, the less a car weighs, the faster it's gonna go. Right. And back there, the competition was way different. It wasn't like bracket racing. It was a different kind of competition. They had different classes, okay? They did all that to go faster and to win at the end of the day. In a Pontiac motor, like a small block Chevy is known as a small block, and the big block is known as a 396. The Pontiac motor from the 326 or 455 was called the wide block because everything went interchangeable. And that was different with the Chevys. Because if you had a 396 head, you couldn't put that on a 327. Where on a Pontiac, you can take a 326 and pour a 455 on it, and they fit. So they were called the wide block.
Oh, okay, so it was just a lot more versatile, I guess, then. But that's also another thing. So when we talk about cars, you talk about Chevy, Mopar, Pontiac. Mopar were very expensive, and but Pontiacs were also very expensive. But is that because you could do more with them? What made them more expensive than Chevys?
The biggest misconception of all of this, okay, is when you're an older guy like myself, and you know the history of cars, okay, and you realize that back in the 1960s, when Mickey Thompson and all these people were making these muscle cars to sell to the public, okay, that's the time when GM pulled out a Pontiac, and the people that kept racing Pontiacs had to do it on their own pockets, where Mopar, we'll say like Mr. Norm, or we'll say the Copo Camaros, okay, they did things to sell these cars and make them, and the Chevy car was always known as a poor man's car, because to this day it's the same thing. You buy a set of heads for a small block Chev, they're $2,500. I just bought a set of heads for a Pontiac, which is about the same, and they're $4,600. Wow. So that's what really phased them out. It's not that one was better, but one was cheaper, and that's what people did.
That's crazy. Is there any reasons why it's so much more expensive?
Yes, it's like anything else. If you can, we'll say, sell, like we'll go to the small block Chevy, which is definitely the most popular motor in the world. It is, okay. if you're selling something and you sell by volume and you make 100 set of heads and those heads sell in a week, that's the way to go. But when you're selling a Pontiac head and there's no demand for them because they're too expensive, the sales drop. And it's really as simple as that.
So really, it's not like functionality or easy to build or whatnot. It's just supply and demand, basically.
Yeah.
A lot of people have 350s. You find them in many cars.
Yes.
But obviously, the Pontiac 400s, they're not very common at all. So we have the Plymouth here. We have your front-engine dragster. And in the garage, you're actually working on another project. Talk about that one real quick.
Well, I just retired a few years ago, and as much as sometimes it's hard to get up in the morning because, you know, after working for 40 years, you don't have the energy that you used to, but cars kind of keep you going because with that passion, you want to do stuff, and that's what you need to do. So I decided to buy, actually it was a pretty rare car. It's a 63 Le Mans that Arnie Beswick raced in 1963 when it came out, and he went to Nitro and he made fame. He's known by almost any drag racer or anybody that's been around for a while. And I wanted to build a tribute car to him, and I'm hoping that I make it down to California and make it down for sure to the Pontiac Nationals next year with this car, with the car that Arnie Beswick had back in the day, including the Tiger paint job, but a complete Pontiac driveline, because for me, there's just no other way. It's Pontiac, and that's just the way it is.
So the last thing I want to talk about is, you know, you got a completely different era of cars here.
Yeah.
And now, you know, we're in the 2020s now. Times are different. Cars are made of plastic, running on batteries, all this. What is it about what is it about back in the day that made it so special versus now?
That, Max, is something hard to explain because we come from a different era. We had a lot of freedom in a lot of ways. We were a little bit more rebellious and also got away with that. And driving a car back in the 70s, a race car, your mother wouldn't want you to go out with that guy. That's just today that's changed. Okay, so we're kind of known as rebels, you know, street racing and stuff like that there. And that's what attracts you, you know what I mean? And that's for the racing stuff, okay? It's just one of those things where, yeah, it's you or it's not. It's an addiction for sure, no doubt about it. And then if there's no fear, you don't enjoy it.
But you know what's funny? That almost goes back to the greaser areas, you know, the bad guys, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you know what they say, you know, bad times don't last, but bad guys do.
It's so true, Mac. That's so true.
It's cool to see guys like yourself right now and so much history.
It's very hard to explain different generations because if you're not there, you haven't lived it. You know, it doesn't mean that you can't enjoy it. That's not what I'm saying at all. But it's just a different era, and you know, it was just different. It was just a different time.
Yeah.
It was a different kind of rebelliousness. Racers used to argue a lot. Some of them would get in their cars drunk. All that stuff was all true.
Yeah.
Okay. Times have changed all that stuff. Today, if you get in a race car and you're drunk, okay, you're done for the day. Yeah. Simple. So it's an era that's really changed. Okay. Did it change for the best? Well, that depends which way you want to look at it.
Open to interpretation.
Yeah. You know, myself, if I look back, I wouldn't change anything that I've ever done. I think it was just great. You know, yeah, it's just fantastic. The nostalgia for me really struck it hard.
Well, that's cool. I think the next thing we got to do is keep it going by driving this thing. We got to take this thing out for a spin.
Begin drag racing,
the
going fast on the streets kind of disappears.
Yeah.
Because you know, why would you try to go 100 miles an hour on the streets when you go 150 on the track?
That's a good line.
You know, and a safe place and not be scared of doing it.
Well, that's the thing. And when I'm doing this show, I don't want to encourage people to drive like idiots on the road. I actually try to get people to, like, you want to do it on the track. There's nothing wrong with hammering it just to hear the power, but we're not doing 150 mile an hour.
Yeah.
This is pretty cool though. Yeah, that front end is really up in the air.
Oh yeah, you can feel it's real different. It drives like a truck.
It does drive. We're so high in the air. It does feel like I'm driving my Bronco right now or something. So how much horsepower does the 400 have?
I would probably say a very honest 400 horsepower, but it also had a 4-speed behind it.
Yeah.
It had a
So
four-speed
okay. So what's the 4-speed that comes in Pontiac?
a lot like the Chevys, like they came with the Muncies.
Yeah. So it's a Muncie as well.
Yes, pretty well. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like a Muncie or Borg Warner, which is very popular from I guess 72 to 81. All the Z28s, they all had Borg Warners, and that's what I had in this.
Oh, okay.
That's what I had in this.
So you could put something, if you wanted to, something modern like a Tremec 5-speed.
Absolutely.
Really? Wow, that'd be pretty cool.
A matter of fact, a lot of people aren't doing it because
Well, a lot of these guys travel these car shows around. You're doing a lot of miles, so the 4-speeds are nice for racing, but having something like a 5-speed with an overdrive gives you the ability to really go long distance.
Yeah, they're also a lot stronger.
Yeah.
You know, you have a 4-speed of Muncie, and if you put 400 horse behind it, before the end of the summer, you will break it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They weren't designed for this.
Yeah.
That didn't exist back in the day.
This is this nice little road I was telling you about.
Yeah. Wow.
So do you see actually how smooth it actually drives?
It's super smooth. I wasn't. I thought for some reason I had the vision that a gasser was very rough.
Well, you're very right about it because they usually are. Okay. Like I said.
So what did you do differently here to make it the way it is?
Well, better shocks. You know what I mean? Leaf springs in the back. The back suspension on this is all 69 Camaro. Okay. Like your Nova type of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, leaf spring. So leaf springs, good shocks. And shocks today are built, they're not like they were back in the day. The shocks are better.
Yeah,
so stuff like that there. Make sure there's no plane in the steering box. Just little things that make it just a little bit better.
Okay.
You know, it's nothing like a Cadillac, but you know that, and it's still rough, but you know that it's just a lot better driving car.
I think the leaf springs are really underrated. I know a lot of people say, oh, you need to go modern with the coils in the back and the 4-link. You don't need that. You can, but this, if they're in good shape, because a lot of people are running old stuff, original parts. You're not you're gonna get original quality. You know, if it's 50 years old, it's gonna run like crap.
Yeah, well, in the old days, you know, the cars went to 120, 130 miles an hour on the track. They weren't very stable, but they did do it. And then today, the biggest thing about a car like this here is when you actually start 200 miles, 100 miles an hour, maybe a little bit less, 80 miles an hour, because the car is so high in the front, the car starts lifting up and the car gets weak at the steering wheel, starts hydroplaning on you. Going back to the technology today, the cars today are slammed to the ground so they don't have that problem. And it is a problem with these cars. Even this one here, if I start going 60, 70 miles an hour, I can feel the steering wheel actually getting lighter in it.
Wow.
You know?
And you have a parachute on the back.
That parachute is for looks because it gets people talking. And I had wheelie bars on it, and I just took them off to put them on my 63.
Right on.
You know? So this is how this car runs all day. So yeah, as you can see, it runs, you know, like grab the steering wheel.
Yeah.
Feel the steering. There's no shake and shimmy.
No, not at all.
You know.
That's beautiful, man.
But then again, like I said, I do my own body work and all my own mechanical.
Yeah.
You know, that was my trade. So when I have problems, because I didn't handle this when I bought it, believe me.
No, this is amazing. I'm very surprised. Yeah.
The stuff you get today that's carbureted with fuel injection and all that stuff really is the best for fuel efficient stuff like that.
The EFI systems
but
are really
in theory,
good.
if you're an old guy like me and you run a carburetor, okay, well, us guys can tune carburetors.
Absolutely.
That's who we are. If you buy like I said, like an EFI, man, it tunes for you.
Yeah.
So I don't like the new stuff. So obviously I'm not going to get one.
That's okay.
You know, and when you're drag racing, and you're drag racing old school stuff, okay, they work. You know, that stuff all works. But the newer stuff is definitely better. But is it what you really want? It's kind of a personal thing. When I race my dragster, or whenever I race any car, because I've raced a lot of different cars, I'm very, very serious at the line. Whatever I can do to win, that's what I'm going to do. When the race is over, let's have a drink.
Nice.
you forget about it, because you know what? That's what racing is. You don't always win, and you lose a lot more than you win. That's just racing.
That's just racing.
But when you go to the line, you bring it all in, and after that, like the club behind me, ONDR, which is called Ontario Nostalgia Drag Racing. That's what it's called. I've been with that group for about 20 years. Wow. They're in Southern Ontario. They got to be the most toughest people to race with.
Really?
And when you go there, you have to put it all on the line. At night, every night, when we race here for the weekend, there's a bonfire, and we all sit around the bonfire, and we talked about how we lost. It's really good people, good racing. And the next day, right back at it again.
I love it. Well, Well, thanks for being on the show. I'm going to give you this Between the Wheels hat.
You want me to wear it right now?
No, you don't got to wear it, but you definitely deserve it. That's
Thank
yours.
you. Okay, great.
Thanks for being on the show, man.
This will stay in my car. I'll probably tape it down, but that's going to stay in the car. So when
that
I
makes
go
me feel
somewhere,
really happy.
that's good, right on.
Thanks for being on it, man.
Good time,
Cheers.
yeah.
Next time on Between the Wheels.
I cannot imagine recreating that time at all. There was a real magic spot in the 80s and 90s. We had no idea how significant and how fast the cars would get. Tonight I met a person who will be my friend for the next 30 years, and you had no idea. In the 80s, there was no classes really set up for street cars to race at the track. And they basically, had a couple lines for us, and one of them was, you won't be as fast as us. It can't be done. We wanted to know who was really the fastest. And we were able to get that on the street. So yeah, let's race.